Hello, everyone. Saturday night in Louisville. We should be at Thunder over Louisville, kicking off the Kentucky Derby, but we're not. So join me in the Magic Library if you're out there. Hey, Ashley, good to see you. Luis, Beth, how's everyone doing? Charles, how are you doing? Donnie, Beth, hi. Patty, hi. Hope everyone's doing okay tonight. Hey, Susan Priest, Nancy. Yeah, so if you're checking in, hey, Mike, say hi. Let people know where you're checking in from, especially if you're from out of the country, and let us know what you're drinking tonight. Hey, Suzanne. So I'm back to Evan Williams tonight. And my nice tumbler Matt Sweeney gave me the other day. So cheers. So we are going to continue reading from my 12th book, an unconventional memoir titled Voodoo Days at La Casa Fabulosa. It's about the supposedly haunted house I lived in Louisville, Kentucky for 8 years. Hey, VG and Marcia and Catherine. And we started off over 3 weeks ago now with me reading stories from my 11th book, which is True Ghost Stories and Eerie Legends from America's Most Haunted Neighborhood. And once we exhausted the stories from that, we kind of switched over to my memoir. So hi Sylvia or Olivia, who's ever on there, Dawn, Johnny Lewis, good to see you. So we hit the 3-week mark, and now we're going for 4 weeks. We'll see how long we can keep going. I think we can get another full week out of this. So once we run out of stories from this place, we're gonna have to go someplace else. So I can probably read a night or two of the beginning of my book, the true crime book we talked about the last night of True Ghost Stories and Eerie Legends, the murder house on 4th Street. So we'll see. There's Aunt Jane and Justin, Steve, Lisa, cousin Lisa, good to see you, Terry. So let people know where you are. Check in at, you can check in at La Casa Fabulosa on Facebook. You can check in at David's Magic Library. Mike Horan is out of his mind drinking rum out on the veranda. Well, good for you. And yeah, say hi where you're from. You can also check in at Old Louisville, America's Most Haunted Neighborhood. So we want to get the word out about Old Louisville and all the great stories, all the great homes we have. Okay, hey Margie. So last night, we found out there are still real-life hobos amongst us. Hey Gregory and cousin Joni, Andrew, good to see you all. And we left off where I had finally made it into the subterranean areas beneath an old building downtown. In Old Louisville, there's legends that there's lots of underground tunnels that the bootleggers used to use during Prohibition back in the 1920s. So I met a hobo by the name of Norman, and he invited me into supposedly one of these secret tunnels. So where we left off, he had opened this door, kind of a door that was hidden behind a big wooden barrel that they used for tobacco and bourbon back in the day. And he shone a flashlight and he went inside and kind of was waiting for me. So the last thing he said was, "Come," and a gleam filled his eyes as he motioned with an arm. So that was the cliffhanger we left off with last night. So to continue, that's when I got creeped out and knew that I couldn't follow Norman the hobo into the depths of the underground area beneath Louisville. So this is the only time I didn't do the dumb thing and kind of throw caution to the wind. I actually got a little scared, and so I left, and I never actually got to go in that tunnel. So who knows what happened. But thanks, Norman, I said, but I really have to go. It's been nice talking to you. I turned and quickly found my way out of the basement and up to the stairs to the main part of the old Louisville and Nashville Railroad building. On the sidewalk in front of the sign for Squirrely's Magic Tea Room, I took a deep breath of warm air and went down to the next street and found the car. So that was actually the end of the chapter, but I was playing around, so I ended it a little earlier with our cliffhanger to make sure people come back. And I'll see if I can do the same thing tonight. I'm not so sure if I can, though. So the next chapter is called Iron Hoops. And remember, I moved into this house and strange things started happening. But what I discovered is it was the real life characters in the neighborhood that were really interesting. So we met Loretti. She lives in the high-rise apartment across the road from where we lived. And Patricia Crowell's in Cuba tonight? In your head. Okay, well, good. And she was like the neighborhood watchdog. She'd keep an eye out from her top floor apartment and call me whenever anything seemed to be going wrong. Hey, Claudia. And cousin Lori. Hey, Maria. And Lisa. Hey, Becky. Joanne Klein. So Joanne says I don't need a cliffhanger for us to come back, but it always helps if there's a cliffhanger, okay? Charles is asking if anyone in the Germantown Highlands area hearing fireworks. Yes, I'm over here off of Newburgh, and yeah, probably celebrating thunder that should be going on tonight. That's probably it, okay? But so we met Cookie. I think we might see Cookie again once or twice before the book ends. We heard about this neighborhood witch, supposedly, called the Stick Witch. We've met a couple of interesting characters, and tonight we're going to meet some more, okay? So, like I said, this chapter is called Iron Hoops. So, a glorious Indian summer still nipping at its heel, fall soon arrived in old Louisville and set about to cooling the evenings and fading the leaves on the oaks and cottonwoods to a palette of mellow orange, pink, and gold. Darkness arrived earlier and earlier, and soon St. James Court and the surrounding areas buzzed with activity. With the first days of October came the St. James Court Art Show, a neighborhood celebration started in the 1950s that faithfully brought in hundreds of thousands of visitors to admire the work of oodles of artists and craftsmen against the backdrop of wonderful Victorian architecture. Our neighborhood association always hosted a number of participants in booths along 3rd Street and Magnolia, and it fell to volunteers to check on the artists and see if they needed anything, and occasionally to watch the booth for them when they went and left to take a break. I was in front of Mike and Judy Seal's house on the first day of the fair, watching a booth while the potter selling her wares there ran off to get something for lunch, when a turbaned figure on the walkway caught my attention. Her upper body emerged from the passing throng, and she glanced briefly into the booth where I perched on a foldable director's chair. Then a stream of shoppers washed her away, and I jumped down and tried to locate her in the crowd, but she was gone by the time I made it to the sidewalk. I hadn't got a good look at her face, but I was relatively certain it was Josephine. Pausing for a moment to gawk at the large Italianate house before me, I studied the facade. My eyes wandered to a piece of architectural detail under the roofline. It was a strip embellished with stylized tobacco leaves, the source of the first homeowner's wealth. To the south stood a whimsical turreted residence built in 1892 for the owner of Azra, that year's winner of the Kentucky Derby. After gazing at its beautiful arched entryway and sculpted stone trimming, I retreated to the less crowded confines of the booth. Suddenly, I felt something hit me in the back of the legs before I could jump back onto my perch. Oh, it wasn't another errant goat, was it? Perplexed, I turned around and watched as a large metal hoop bounced back, rolled several feet, and fell flat onto the ground, barely missing several expensive pieces of ceramic on the nearest shelf. "Oh, I'm ever so sorry," said a pleasant voice, as a tall form rushed in, ducking his head and evidently in pursuit of the errant ring. "Oh, she got away from me there for a moment." Before bending down to retrieve the hoop, the tall man spread his hands, reached out his arms, and traced a circular shape in the air over the ground. Then he made an involved gesture that somewhat resembled the sign of the cross and stood up, raising the hoop perpendicular to the ground so it rested at his side. "Not a problem," I said, moving aside so a prospective customer could get a better view of a large fruit bowl. "Hello," said the man with the hoop. "My name is Godwin Goodwin." He reached out his hand and shook mine. He wore a black straw hat with an immense brim that reminded me of something the Amish might wear. Nice to meet you, I said. Have you heard of the Church of the Iron Hoop? My eyes drifted from his face, clean-shaven and boyish, to the dark trench coat he wore. It had come open and revealed dark linen slacks and a black vest over a white shirt with a grandfather collar. We believe in the circular nature of life and worship the sacred circle. He picked up his hoop and held it out for an illustration. Well, I can say that's something I haven't heard of before, I said. Are you a priest? He laughed. Oh, no, I'm not a priest. They wear white. I'm an adherent, that's all. But we're looking for new devotees today. Then he smiled. That's how it goes. You start off as a devotee, then become an adherent, and finally a priest. A low chuckle ensued as he lowered his voice. Church of the Iron Hoop, anyone? Well, thanks, I said, but I'm not one for organized religion. Oh, but we're only very loosely organized, he said. We believe in almost any viewpoint. We're almost Unitarian in that respect, as long as it recognizes the sacred circle and the cyclical nature of this existence. Then he turned serious, and he narrowed his eyes at me. You do recognize the sacred circle and the cyclical nature of this existence, don't you? Cyclical nature of this existence, yes. Sacred circle, not so sure, I said. But we're all part of a sacred circle, he said, shaking his iron hoop for emphasis, and we must do what we must. Oh, yes, we must do what we must. Repeating it half-heartedly, I was suddenly elated to see the pottery vendor headed back in my direction. I breathed a sigh of relief. She resumed her post and thanked me for the break. I, in turn, said goodbye and quickly exited the tent. Godwin Goodwin followed. We must respect all religions as part of the sacred circle. He quickly rolled the hoop along at his side as he struggled to keep up. Hey, Sheila. Hey, Sue. I quite agree, I said, trying to look like I had someplace important to go. I had half an hour before I had to go to the next booth, so I decided to walk down 3rd Street. Christians, Muslims, Jews, he said, Buddhists, Taoists, Hindus, we're all one. Why, shamanism, spiritualism, and voodooism even have something to offer. I stopped dead in my tracks and looked at him. Voodooism? Oh, yes, he said in all earnestness. I went to a lovely voodoo gathering not too long ago. Nice people, those voodooists. Here in Old Louisville? Despite evidence to the contrary, I was still having a hard time coming to terms with a real voodoo presence in Kentucky. Oh, yes, indeed. He leaned in and smiled. Back in June it was, to celebrate St. Jean's Day. And if you remember, St. Jean's Day was the day that Beau came and threw his rock through the window to get my attention, and which is the Voodoo High Holy Day, we found out. Immediately, my mind drifted back to the night Beau had summoned me to the front door by means of his polished green rock. Then I remembered his story about the gathering in Central Park. Say, did you all have a problem finding your star attraction of the evening by any chance? Star attraction? Godwin's face went blank. I leaned in for a conspiratorial whisper. Yeah, you know, a sacrificial goat or something like that. Sacrificial goat? He wrinkled up his nose as if he'd gotten a whiff of something extremely unpleasant. No, he said, moving his head back and forth. There were no animals involved whatsoever. Modern Voodists do nothing of the kind, I tell you. Voodoo today is all about root work and spirit worship and things like that. No blood involved. He stopped and appeared to think for a minute, at least from what I've seen. Well, just asking, I said. I seized on his momentary distraction from proselytizing, and I decided to continue with the changed subject. So anyway, where exactly did you say you attended this voodoo meeting in Old Louisville? Well, it was over by the... He stopped abruptly and reconsidered his answer. Oh, he said, drawing out the word as he shook his head and mustered a pitying look. Ever so sorry, but I was sworn to secrecy, and I promised not to divulge the location. But don't fret, the voodooists are indeed amongst us, if that's what you need to find your way to the sacred circle and this Church of the Iron Hoop. With that, he broke away from me and joined another similarly clad man rolling a hoop down the sidewalk. But before they had moved out of earshot, I heard Godwin Goodwin say, "Goodness, I almost slipped up and told him about the voodoo ceremony over at Fort George." Then the crowd swallowed them up, and nothing could be seen except their black, wide-brimmed hats bobbing on a sea of heads. Fort George. It seemed to ring a bell somehow, but when I tried to match the name with the location in old Louisville, I came up empty-handed. Racking my brain, I wandered from booth to booth before stopping to admire a collection of hand-woven baskets in front of the old Samuel Culbertson residence. Built in 1897, it was an enormous house in the Renaissance Revival style, built for the son of Indiana's wealthiest man, William Stewart Culbertson. Suddenly, a snippet of conversation caught my attention, and I turned to see two elderly women pointing at the huge, orange glazed brick mansion in front of us. "Iron hoops," said one lady. "Old-fashioned iron rolling hoops, that's what they had." "You don't say," said the other. "I heard that too." "Yes, indeed." Her friend bobbed her head up and down. "I know several people who have seen them, the ghosts of two young boys who run around laughing and playing with those old rolling hoops, and right up there in their former bedroom." She jabbed her finger at an arched insert enclosing two windows on the second floor of the Culbertson mansion. Strange. I'd been researching stories of two ghostly apparitions at that self-same mansion, and I desperately wanted to talk to the two ladies to find out what else they knew. Clumsily, I tried to navigate upstream and catch them, but they disappeared in the steadily moving river of passers-by. I hadn't progressed more than a few yards when I came face to face with Godwin Goodwin and his hoop-wielding, wide-brimmed accomplice. Upon seeing me, Godwin smiled and raised the hoop so it framed his face. "Don't forget the sacred circle and the Church of the Iron Hoop," he said in passing. "We'll be watching for you." That was when the Iron Hoop coincidence hit me, and I began to wonder if I wasn't in for another voodoo day. I was passing in front of the Bishop's Hat House, named for the large parapet in the shape of a bishop's mitre on the facade, when Ron Harris, the owner, came out of the door and walked down the front walkway. "Hey, Ron," I said, "do you know anything about Fort George? It's supposed to be somewhere here in old Louisville." Behind him, his wife Jane stood in the doorway and waved. Ron scratched his chin and thought for a few seconds. Then his eyes lit up. "Hey, isn't that little cemetery over there where the Tunerville neighborhood is? On Brook or Floyd, I believe." "That's Fort George?" I'd passed the tiny little park with its stone marker numerous times, but never thought of it as a cemetery. "And it's a cemetery. I don't remember seeing any graves or anything." "Well, there might only be one or two small headstones, but I believe it is a graveyard of sorts." Ron scanned the crowd, obviously in a hurry to get someplace else. He was booth-sitting as well, while Jane stayed inside and from the foyer sold Happy Balls, the bourbon candy made up on the third floor of their mansion, the Bishop's Hat House. "Sorry to run," he said, "but that woman selling artificial arrangements made from fish scales is expecting me to relieve her. Gotta go." He lowered his head and entered the moving throng. I let the current of people sweep me along to my next booth-sitting appointment, and in my mind, I was already planning my evening. So later, Rocky and Bess had already had a long walk that afternoon, and they were tuckered out. So Fritz, panting happily as we strolled, was my only companion when I left the house that night. But while closing the back gate behind us, I noticed something was different about the wooden door that opened onto the back alley. I leaned in for closer inspection and discovered that somebody had carved a series of crude symbols into the wood. They looked like they could have been part of the old hobo system of communication that Norman had told me about, and I made a mental note to look up their possible significance when I had a chance. Then we headed over to Tunerville, the neighborhood with old Louisville's only cemetery. For some reason, all but one of the street lamps along the 1200 block of Floyd Street had gone out, and I let the dim blue of a solitary light guide me past the rusty wrought iron fence and up to the small gate that gave onto the little plot of land known as Fort George. Before entering, I paused and looked around me. On one side of the grassy lot crouched a small bungalow-type house, the faded paint of its siding begrudgingly catching the dull glow of the lamplight. To the other side sat a simple frame house, upright and painted in a dark blue that allowed it to slip away into the night. Unblinking and solemn, dark windows stared out from the houses and questioned my presence in their midst. Ignoring any warning that they might have been trying to impart, I opened the gate and stepped onto the walkway. Several old-growth maples soared overhead, branches hanging heavy with golden leaves that swayed gently in the breeze. Broken twigs from a recent windstorm littered the ground. Wild grapevines and undulating ribbons of waxy English ivy wove themselves through the perforations in an old chain-link fence that enclosed the space on 3 of its 4 sides. Ahead and to the left, a squat stone marker, rounded at the top like a tombstone, and with unruly tufts of weeds poking out at its base, hunched close to the ground. I let Fritz snoop around a bit and then pulled him closer to me while I knelt and used the light from a small keychain flashlight to examine the dedication on the face of the monument. The Daughters of the American Revolution had placed it there in 1947 to commemorate the burial ground of Kentucky pioneer Captain George Gray and his wife, Mildred, who had been friends and neighbors of George Washington. Farther down the walk stood 2 small rectangular gravestones. One presumably was for George and the other for his wife. According to the one on the left, Mildred had died in 1828. I could see that George had preceded her by 5 years, dying in 1823. At my feet, Fritz stirred and drew his line taut. There was a rustling noise off in the distance. "You over here looking for ghosts?" asked a deep, raspy voice from a darkened corner of the lot. A low, roiling growl in his throat, Fritz lunged forward and strained his lead until I calmed him and made him heel. "No, sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," I said. And the voice said, "Oh, I didn't mean to startle you." It seemed to emanate from a small dot of orange in the distance. "No, I'm not looking for ghosts," I said, and I cautiously inched forward the disembodied voice. "I'm just out walking my dog." As I approached, the red-orange glow flared and the smell of smoke wafted through the air. Soon a form took shape in the dim glare of the nearest light, and I spied a sitting figure with a cigarette on a nearby bench. With the glowing end dancing around in the semi-darkness, the hand that had the cigarette motioned for me to come closer. "Come on over and sit a spell," said the husky voice. "You're that guy I saw on the news, aren't you? The one with the weird stuff happening in your house, right?" I guess so." I watched as Fritz neared the hand offered him and sniffed. Deciding the figure presented no imminent threat, he trotted back to me and wagged his approval. Then I sat down next to the person and took a closer look. "My name's Candy," said the unmistakable, masculine voice. "You're David, right?" He held out a richly bejeweled hand, large and calloused, and shook mine in greeting. With the other, he lifted a long-stemmed ivory cigarette holder and put it to its lips. Rhinestones of varying sizes formed an elaborate pattern along the duct down to the mouthpiece, and they sparkled when a breeze picked up and pushed the branches clear of a solitary bulb, illuminating the side entrance of a frame house. In the flickering light afforded by the jostling and the swaying of the branches, Candy's features revealed themselves, and I was able to see a good amount of dark stubble covering his chin. He wore what appeared to be a red wig that had been bobbed to the shoulders, and on top of that was a black beret that perched jauntily to one side. Suddenly self-conscious, he raised a hand to his face and grimaced. "Sorry, I was too lazy to shave today," he said. "I didn't think anyone was going to see me tonight, and there you go, waltzing into my own private little park when no one ever comes over here." "Oh, don't worry about me," I said with a laugh. Then I took a seat on the bench while Fritz snuffled around in the dry grass. I didn't shave today either. I smiled and reached up to rub my chin in a gesture of solidarity. The branches swayed in another strong breeze, and I caught a glimpse of the rest of Candy's outfit. A red satin gown, cinched at the waist, with a shiny black belt, a mink stole, and black pumps. Around Candy's neck was a string of pearls, and there were matching earrings as well. A small handbag embroidered with an Art Deco pattern sat next to him on the bench. He took a long, luxurious drag on the cigarette and focused his eyes on me. "So, you come over this way often?" His eyes closed as he savored the intake and then exhaled a long stream of white smoke. "No, not usually, but I heard that this was actually a cemetery and I wanted to come and see for myself." Much to my relief, the stirring wind changed direction and blew his next lungful of smoke away from me. "I don't know how many times I've passed by here," I said, without ever noticing the tombstones. "Yeah, they've been here for a while," he said. The toe of his shoe crossed over his leg, carving lazy circles in the air. "Some hoity-toity housewives had them erected after World War II. He took another drag from his cigarette and cradled his elbow before breathing out. "Bitches." I stifled a laugh and asked why he said that. "Well, I'll tell you why," he said. "'Cause they're all a bunch of East End snobs, that's why, thinking they're better than everyone else all the time." He hunched down so the stole covered more of his neck, and he paused as someone nearby pushed a squeaky shopping cart down the sidewalk. Once the person had passed, Candy straightened up again. "You ever see some of those houses out in the East End?" he asked. "Those McMansions? They're awful. And what they wear, putting on their fancy schmancy dresses and going to their fancy schmancy parties and not inviting their brother because he's not good enough." He stopped abruptly, and I could see the hand holding the cigarette was shaking. Fritz lifted his head and studied Candy for a moment. Then he returned his attention to the grass and resumed exploring. He wandered over to a large mound of moonflowers and stuck his nose in among the huge white blossoms. "Yeah, they're an uppity bunch out there on the East End," said Candy. "Not nice and friendly like the people down here in old Louisville." He regained his calm, and he placed another cigarette in the holder, lit it, and puffed contentedly. "So, you were interested in the cemetery," he said. "Do you know much about it?" "Well, I've heard some things, but I'm not sure how much is fact and how much is fiction." He waved his cigarette in the direction of the stone marker and blew a double stream of smoke out through his nose. "Now, there you got the facts, that George and Mildred lived in this piece of land when they died, etc., etc., etc. But I've heard some stories that I'm sure you'd find interesting, that is, if you haven't heard them yourself already." "I don't know a thing about this place, other than what I've read on the marker," I replied. "So what have you heard?" A voice echoed somewhere off in the distance, and Candy flinched slightly. "Hope that's not Susan," he said under his breath. Seeing the blank look on my face, he explained. "Susan, my wife. She doesn't like it when I put on her clothes and go out for a stroll in her stuff." "Ah, okay," I said. "I get it." "She was sound asleep when I left, but she might have woken up." He flicked a bit of ash and looked around. "The old banshee." A slight whirring could be heard, accompanied by the sound of running feet, and the silhouettes of two young boys appeared on the other side of the wrought iron fence. Rolling two large hula hoops alongside them as they ran, they sped down the sidewalk and disappeared from sight. "Hula hoops? Well, that's something you don't see much nowadays," he said. And he chuckled. "I guess they must be coming back in style." He started to toke on the cigarette, but quickly reconsidered. "Oh, yeah," he said. "I was telling you about the old place that used to be here." "Yeah, was it a fort or something?" I said. "Well, my grandparents used to tell us stories, and they said it was a big old house with a high fence around it, kind of like a stockade. I guess it was for when the Indians used to attack and stuff like that. It was built in the 1700s, and it was a pretty impressive home for its day." A screen door slammed at one of the houses nearby, and Candy paused to listen. Satisfied that Susan wasn't coming after him, he continued. "Well, this was back in the olden days, back when they had slaves and all that. Supposedly, some of them were caught doing the voodoo rituals they had brought with them from Africa. Now, that didn't sit too well with the overseer. He punished them, and that's when the trouble really began. He gave a dramatic pause and studied me for my reaction. What happened then? I rested my elbows on my knees and leaned in a bit to hear better. One night, when George and Mildred were away, he said, the slaves set fire to the house and it burnt to the ground. Some say George was actually inside the house and died, but I don't think that's true. He took a long drag on his cigarette and leaned back against his bench. Well, what happened to the slaves then? Off in the distance, a strip of clouds slid through the night sky and exposed the full moon. Overhead, the branches rattled and two long hollow hoots echoed in the leaves. Candy raised his head and waited for a few seconds before answering. They supposedly ran off and intermarried with the Indians and started their own little clan. A voodoo clan, I guess. He smoked his cigarette down to the end and opened his handbag to retrieve another. From what I hear, descendants of those slaves still live amongst us today. I watched him fit the cigarette in his holder as I tried to visualize the details of his story in my mind. He lit the cigarette with a gold-plated lighter and stowed it in his handbag. One of them is supposed to be a big voodoo woman in these parts. Josephine. My heart skipped a beat. You wouldn't happen to know her name, I said, would you? Can't say that I do. Like I said, I don't know what's true and what's not true. All I know is what was told to me. In a nearby house, the dry scrape of a window sash being raised broke the momentary silence, and all of a sudden, a jarringly female voice pierced the air. Randy! Oops, time to go. Candy jumped to his feet and smoothed down the front of his wife's dress. Randy! Screamed the banshee-like voice. Where are you? You better not have on my new shoes again. Well, nice talking to you, said Candy. Maybe I can sneak through the back window without her noticing. He quickly ran to the gate, stumbling slightly on his heels as he pushed his way through, and then he made a mad dash across the street. Several houses down, he crossed the front yard and disappeared into the shadows between the homes. So that's the end of that chapter, which was called Iron Hoops. And like I said, a lot of this story is about these weird coincidences that I uncovered while living in this house in old Louisville. Yeah, so Candy's name I took because his wife was calling out was actually Randy. So he was kind of like Kim Bob we met last night. Kim was a neighborhood transvestite. When he was dressed like a woman, he wanted to be called Kim, but his name was Bob, so we never knew what he was going to be. Everyone just called him Kim Bob in the neighborhood. But so we got a little break. Let's do a little toast. Cheers, everyone. Let people know what you're drinking tonight. And if you remember last night, I said if you all behaved, I'd show you some of the ancient documents that we have for our Thursday night / Monday night / Tuesday night dinner club. So we used to meet once a week, but we got older and then jobs and things kind of interrupted, and lots of people have come and gone, but we don't meet as much as we used to do, but we still meet. And once a year we try to have a convocation in Slade in eastern Kentucky. We rent a cabin, we all get together. We basically cook and eat, wear pajamas all weekend. And whenever we have new members, we have our convocation and we have like our initiation rituals. And so I have the magic basket with some of our artifacts that I was telling you about last night. And some of these are old, so I better put on some protective gloves because the acid in your hands isn't good for ancient documents. And I was mentioning last night, some of these ancient documents have been translated from the Sanskrit. Kelly Atkins and I, we were on a archaeological dig somewhere in the Holy Land, and we found a broken vase in the ground, and there were all these ancient scrolls and parchments. And so I took a crash course at Berlitz to learn Sanskrit, and I was able to translate some of these things. So I can just show you a couple of them tonight, but where's the most important stuff? Well, there's certain vestments you have to wear. Like this is that's the sacred hat that new initiates wear as they're being sworn in. And the initiation gown is at the dry cleaners because I think Matt Sweeney, he was the last initiate. He kind of got it dirty. So it's going to be at the dry cleaners for a while. But we have like the ancient silver receptacle for the holy oil. Some people call it a gravy boat, but that's sacrilege. This is the ancient receptacle for the holy anointing oil. And the most important of the documents, the artifacts we have, is this. Look at how ancient this is. It's so ancient. I'm afraid to touch it. And it's still there. Look, it's the original ancient parchment scrolls that we found on our archaeological dig. And you have to be very careful. See that? See how old it is? It's just like falling apart. It's so ancient. And this is like the Articles of Charterdom. This is like all the rules for the organization and how new members are inducted. And we only take it out once a year, so you all were lucky tonight. Last time we took it out was when Matt Sweeney got initiated. But you got to roll it up a certain way. It's like folding the American flag. If you do it the wrong way, it's disrespectful. So that goes in this special handmade ancient container. And then we've got other things as well. Like this is like the chalice holder. Like there's a special candle that goes up here. Look at those jewels. These are like real jewels. See all those jewels? It's so valuable. I got a call from Sotheby's last week. They heard about this and they were trying to get me to sell some of this stuff, but I won't do it because I'm loyal to the Monday night / Tuesday night / Thursday night dinner club. And what's one other thing I can show you tonight? And there's a special candle, and there's even like sacred match sticks and candle lighters. So look at these. These are the ancient matchsticks. See, it even says sacred matches. So we only take those out once a year when we light this blessed candle of the Holy Gardeniae. And this is the candle, the blessed candle of the Holy Gardeniae. So we still got a ways to go. Look at it, it's only been on for like 10 minutes, like every year, like for 20 years now. So we still got some life left to this. But tune in tomorrow night. I'll show you a couple other ancient documents and artifacts, like that's the special rites for the new initiates. And I don't know what's in this, but this is another. We got this one, the original one, and then we got the minor one. And we got another sacred vestment. So tune in tomorrow night and I'll show you what else we got. There's like an ancient bourbon bottle too that we have to sip from. So that's all you get to see tonight. And let me get this out of the way and take off my gloves. And then we can continue with our next chapter, which is, I'm going to read the whole thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8. We might be able to read all of this. But if you remember, my favorite chapter, the one I had the most fun writing and laughing as I wrote it, was about the voodoo ceremony I went to at the ceremony with transvestite voodoo people. And this is how I kind of found out about it. And so my friend Kelly Atkins, the one who was on the archaeological dig with me and helped me, actually we found these things together, and he helped me translate them from the ancient Sanskrit. But he's the one that tuned me in to this other voodoo woman in town, okay? So this chapter is called Mama Wawa and Miss Maybelline. So once again, tune in, take a drink. Cheers, everyone. And if you're just checking in, say hi, let people know where you're from. Check in at David's Magic Library or La Casa Fabulosa. And we'll finish the evening with this chapter called Mama Wawa and Miss Maybelline. So as you see, I'm trying to milk it for all it's worth. We're almost, we only got that much of the book left. That much. We already did this much. So yeah, we're like 3/4 of the way through the book now. So trying to make it last. All right. So Miss Wawa and Mama Wawa and Miss Maybelline. And this is after I met Candy, the transvestite, in Fort George, which is Old Louisville's only cemetery. Okay. So a canopy of gold and maple leaves sifted the light, depositing yellow flecks on the sidewalks of 3rd Street. From random stoops leered cheeky jack-o'-lanterns, their insides eagerly awaiting the warmth of a candle, as residents inside the houses hurried about and prepared bowls of candy for the onslaught of soon-to-come trick-or-treaters. Oblivious to this all, the dogs steadily towed me along and plowed through the carpet of leaves, their noses close to the ground, in search of new smells. Soon it would be Halloween. Kelly laughed. So, you're telling me that out of nowhere, a goat shows up and just knocks you over? Yeah, just like that, I said. Ran up behind me and butted the back of my legs. Well, that's some weird stuff. He shook his head and laughed. Oddball stuff has been happening a lot since we moved into this place, I said. Changing the subject back to the original topic of discussion, I stopped and turned to face him. Now, are you sure this Mama Wawa, or whatever you say she calls herself, is for real? Yeah, man, exactly what you need for your new book, he said. She's from the islands somewhere, and she grew up doing voodoo. She's the real deal, high priestess or something like that. Sacrifices a cat every now and then, stuff like that. Kelly gestured with an imaginary cigar and moved to the side as a band of early trick-or-treaters raced down the sidewalk. She kills cats, you said? Oh, I don't want anything to do with a cat killer. Oh, it's not that bad, he said. Maybe it's just all rumor. Maybe she lives out in the South End somewhere, where all the immigrants live. Don't you see? You think she'll really be there? Can't hurt to find out, he said. They say most afternoons, if she's not at the old Peppermint Bar out by Iroquois Park, she's at the tavern here in Old Louisville. He lifted his wrist and examined his watch. It's still afternoon, and I was just at the Peppermint Bar, and she wasn't there, so... Okay, I said, picking up my pace. Let's hurry up and see if she's still at the tavern. Several minutes later, after dropping off the schnauzers, we stood in front of an unassuming little red brick building at the corner of 4th and Galbert. A large sign over the front door touted their famous Knocker Burger, and its red lettering boasted that the bar stayed open 22 hours a day, proving itself a watering hole that took full advantage of state liquor laws. Not only that, plate lunches daily and breakfast anytime were served since 1933. Okay, gotta get comfortable. A sip of bourbon, I think. Cheers, everyone. And if any of you are old Louisville people, it was the tavern was kind of remodeled recently, so it's not quite the dive it used to be, but it is kind of a neighborhood legend. All right, so it's been around since 1933. Remember. So to top it off, red neon letters on the tiny horizontal Slits that doubled as windows cheerily flaunted the three main virtues of the tavern: beer, whiskey, and food. Our kind of place. A guy in jeans and a baseball hat was sweeping the pavement in front, but Kelly and I breezed past him into the dim interior. Before the door slammed shut behind us, I heard a strange putt-putt noise and turned around to see an old little man on a miniature motorcycle speed by on the sidewalk. Another one of old Louisville's colorful characters, no doubt, I thought. Undaunted, we entered the dimly lit interior of one of the Derby City's most infamous dives. The place was clean, with wooden tables and shiny booze gleaming under the polish of a fresh scrubbing, and the aroma of fried food guided us to a row of booths to the left. We sat down, the faint smell of sauerkraut hanging in the air. I looked around. Two burly biker types were sitting at the bar, their mugs of beer perilously close to empty, and three frat boys sat at the booth next to ours. A petite white-haired gent with oversized sunglasses and a cigarette dangling from his lower lip had parked himself on one of four chairs at a table in the back. On the last stool at the bar perched a huge black transvestite with a Diana Ross afro and a skin-tight blue leather suit that zipped up the front. Excuse me, I said to Kelly. I don't see anyone on the premises who looks like a Mama Wawa. Then I let my eyes roam the dim interior yet another time. Actually, I don't see anyone who looks like a Mama anything, I added. That drag queen at the end of the bar is the closest thing we got. Be patient, said Kelly. They say she usually comes in here. He accepted the menu offered by the barkeep and opened it. Then he twiddled his fingers at the side of his face again. Since we're here, we might as well get a little something to eat. Something to drink in any case, I said, and I gave the menu the once-over and ordered us each a double bourbon on the rocks. Kelly ordered a knocker burger with fries, and I went with an omelet, cheese and tomato. The food arrived rather quickly, and not too long after, the front door creaked open, and in walked a dark woman with an enormous tangle of frizzy curls bound atop her head with a bright yellow scarf. Clad in a pair of red clam diggers and a lacy white blouse, she headed listlessly for the bar, sandals slapping at her feet as she moved. A large straw handbag hung from her shoulder. Hey, Miss Mama Wawa, said the large transvestite, spinning around on her bar stool. How's it going? I was dumbstruck. Oh, everything right as rain, replied Mama Wawa. Her voice had a distinctly Caribbean lilt to it, perhaps Jamaican. She took a seat at the bar next to the drag queen and smiled as the bartender approached. Same as usual? He asked. Sliding a cocktail napkin down in front of her, he looked at her for approval. Yep, same as usual, she sang. Same as usual. Turning to the row of bottles behind him, the bartender grabbed a small water glass, filled it to the top with rum, and set it down in front of Mama Wawa. Thank you, she said, raising the glass and clinking it against the bottle of beer in the transvestite outstretched hand. Cheers, honey. Kelly raised his eyebrows and gave a smug grin. I do believe there's a Mama Wawa in the house. He did that thing with his fingers at the side of his face again. I have to admit, I said, she doesn't look quite like what I had anticipated. How so? Kelly lifted the burger to his mouth and took a bite. I cut off a piece of omelet and pushed it around on the plate a bit before spearing it with my fork. Oh, I guess I was expecting white turbans and flimsy cotton blouses and skirts, that kind of stuff, Haitian stuff. Ah, he popped a fry into his mouth and chewed quickly. That's how it is in Haiti, he said. But there are different forms of voodoo throughout the island, see? It finally dawned on me. He was doing his W.C. Fields voice. I swilled the rest of the bourbon in my glass and raised it for the barkeep to see. Like this. Empty. Blah, blah, blah. So the barkeep nodded his head and pointed to Kelly, who did the same. So, what do we do now that we're all here? I said. Well, you go over and talk to her, I guess, Kelly said. Well, I just can't go up and talk to her. I leaned in and whispered, I'm not sure if it's against voodoo protocol or something like that. Kelly guffawed and took a healthy dram of bourbon. What are you talking about, buddy? All you do is walk around this neighborhood at all hours of the night and talking to people you don't even know. I'm sure you've approached people much more threatening than Mama Wawa. He raised his fork and jabbed it in her direction. Look, she appears perfectly harmless. At the bar, Mama Wawa and the large transvestite laughed at a private joke before lifting their respective beverages to their lips and drinking. It must have been a good one because Mama Wawa cackled and shook her head while her palm slapped the counter. Ooh-ee, she said. Too funny, that one. Too funny, that one. Still laughing, she hopped off her perch and headed to the bathroom at the front of the bar. Now's the time, said Kelly. You can intercept her when she comes out of the John. Ooh, I don't know, I said. Why don't you talk to her first? Man, you're the one snooping around looking for the voodoo in town. You go talk to her, he said. He finished his last bite of food and pushed his plate out of the way. Look, now's your chance. He nodded in the direction of the open door, and out came Mama Wawa. Here she comes, said Kelly. Mama Wawa had exited the bathroom, the door swinging shut behind her, but instead of returning to the bar, she approached the dainty white-haired man at the back table. I'll be back in a bit, Miss Mabel, she said to the huge drag queen. I need to talk to these nice people first. She leaned down to the old man and asked him something. After thinking for a few seconds, he just shook his head and mouthed the word no. Then she sauntered in the direction of the frat boys in the next booth. Oh my goodness, I said under my breath. Is she going to come and talk to us? Maybe she can read minds, Kelly said. Voodoo mind control or something like that. He reached out a hand and fluttered his fingers. Mama Wawa approached the frat boys and whispered something unintelligible. They all shook their heads as if to answer her question in the negative, but one of them said, Try over on Belgravia Court. There's always a ton of them over there. She smiled at them and then moved in our direction. She's coming this way. She's coming this way, I said to Kelly. Good day, gentlemen. Her flip-flops scraped along the floor as she came to a stop at our table. Sorry to bother, but I was wondering if you knew of anyone who had a cat or something, like a cat they did not want, or where I could maybe find a stray cat, perhaps. A cat? I said. Yes, a cat, she said. Meow, meow. Automatically, I lifted several inches out of my seat and I pointed a forceful finger at her. Trying to keep it to a whisper, I said, You better not be looking for a cat to sacrifice. She gasped and took a step back. But, a hand risen to her bosom. She clutched a string of onyx beads hanging there. But who? I wagged my finger at her again. I mean it. If you're looking for cats to kill, I will report you. She gasped again. I never. Using her other hand, she smoothed the tangle of her hair while fighting to regain her composure. I'm looking for a cat, she said, for myself. I love the little creatures. She forced a smile. Silly man. Oh, really? I said. How many cats have you had in your life? She thought for a moment. Oh, many, too many to count. Do you have any cats now? My eyebrows rose as I waited for an answer. Yes. She eagerly nodded her head, but I didn't believe her. Oh, really? How many then? I said. 3. And what are their names? I tapped off the syllables with my empty bourbon glass. She looked to the side in an effort to buy more time as she thought. Well, there's Fluffy, she said, keeping a mental tally of the names. Then there's Miss Kitty, and there's Fido. You named your cat Fido? I said. Fido's not a good name for a cat. She widened her eyes. It's a dog's name, said Kelly. Oh, Miss Mama Wawa leaned back and her smile faded as she thought for a moment. Oh, she a mean kitty almost, mean like a dog. And it's a name for male dogs, I said. Oh, she paused and considered a good response. She's sort of mean too, mean like a man. I snorted. I knew she had never possessed a cat as a pet in her entire life. Sensing an opportune moment, looks like the power is going low. Sensing an opportune moment to slip from view, Mama Wawa started backing away, returning to the bar. A big grin spread on his face, and Kelly polished off his bourbon and motioned for another round when he caught the bartender's attention. Not so fast, Mama Wawa, I said, seized by a temporary bout of bravado. Why don't you sit a spell and tell me a little more about this voodoo that you do? Another loud gasp escaped her lips. But how do you know my name? She cautiously inched her way back to the table. And who told you I can do the Obeah? Her eyes compressed to tiny slits. It is Obeah, not voodoo. Well, I'm in the south part of Louisville a lot, said Kelly, and I've heard people talk about you a lot. I've heard if you're not here, you're out at the Peppermint Bar. Oh, yes, she said, the tone of her voice warming slightly. A wee sip of the rum every day does a soul a world of good. Sounds like you've been having a pretty good sip then, I mumbled, rolling my eyes at the bar and her glass of rum almost empty by then. And what is that supposed to mean? A chill had returned to her voice. Oh, he's joking. Kelly slid down the bench so there was room for her to sit. Why don't you join us for a bit? We're curious, that's all. Tell us a little more about yourself, I said. But leave out the parts about animal sacrifice, if you would. Mama Wawa slapped the air in front of her face and scoffed. Oh, that, she explained. Oh, we hardly ever do that. Only now and then for special occasions or to appease the evil spirits, the baki. And then it's usually a chicken. She tried to look indifferent. Or a cat. Before there was a chance for me to protest, Kelly jumped up and he encouraged her to explain more. So, where are you from? Where'd you go to learn this Obeah? Mama Wawa swiveled her head to the bar. Miss Mabel, why don't you join us over here? Come and join me and these silly men. Bring my drink if you would. Oh, okay, I'll be right there. The large transvestite swung a muscle leg off the stool, grabbed the drinks, and minced across to our table. How y'all doing? Ooh, my name's Maybelline, she said. She plopped down and squished herself into my side of the booth. Ooh, nice to see such handsome men in the establishment today. We exchanged pleasantries, then Mama Wawa leaned across the table and whispered in Maybelline's direction. They knows about the magic I do, and they want to know more. Ooh! Maybelline's voice came out in a scratchy falsetto. You told them about the Obeah? No, I didn't tell them a thing, said Mama Wawa. They found out from somebody else. Who's been talking then? Said Maybelline. We all agreed to keep quiet about your little ceremonies. Kelly and I exchanged glances, caught up in the intrigue and unfolding before us. If it's any consolation, he said, we don't plan on saying anything about what you tell us. Mum's the word. I nodded my head in agreement. Yeah, I won't say a word, I lied. Oh, it's not such a big deal, said Mama Wawa. But we do like to maintain a certain level of secrecy, that's all. Oh, yeah, Maybelline said. Some people misunderstand what we do. They think it's devil worship, stuff like that. Well, so what exactly do you do? I said. Is it voodoo or not? Well, yes and no. Mama Wawa sipped on the last of her rum and took a breath. I come from the hills of Jamaica, and there we call this magic Obeah. My parents, on the other hand, were Haitian. So they practice the voodoo, or the voodoo as you call it. What Mama Wawa does is a little bit of both. Maybelline primly crossed her legs and smiled. You don't say, said Kelly, kind of like a voodoo hybrid. The W.C. Fields voice was back again. Mama Wawa swirled the last taste of rum and tipped it to her lips. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Any chance of someone like me tagging along and watching one of your ceremonies sometimes, I said? As long as there are no cats or dogs or any other animals involved. Maybelline froze, her eyes wide and her lips pursed, and then she slid a sideways glance in Mama Wawa's direction. Mama Wawa looked up from her empty glass and stared at me before answering. Such a thing might be possible, she said. However, discretion is essential in these matters. Sure thing, I said. When could we come to one of these shindigs? As a matter of fact, said Mama Wawa, we be performing a ritual this evening. Halloween? I arched my eyebrows and looked at Kelly. Mama Wawa smiled and nodded her head. Yes, indeed. All Hallows Eve is one of the most sacred days on our calendar. It is a night for spirits and magic. Kelly returned my gaze and shook his head. Sorry, no can do for me. I already have plans tonight and I can't get out of them. You go by yourself. Well, maybe I could wait until the next time so Kelly can come along, I said. Oh, now, if you afraid and would like to wait until your friend can join you, that is quite fine. But Halloween, it's a powerful time for the obeya, said Mama Wawa. Taking the bait, I jumped right in. Afraid? I'm not afraid, I said. Knock yourself out. Let me know what happens afterwards, said Kelly. Well, that settles it, I said. I guess I'll be joining you tonight. Maybelline clapped her hands together and bounced in her seat. Ooh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be real fun. So where do we meet? I said. Do you know the Eastern Cemetery? Mama Wawa took out a silver compact and checked her lipstick. We shall meet there shortly before the midnight. Eastern Cemetery? Now I was getting a bit afraid. In 1989, Eastern Cemetery made the national news when the press discovered that since the 1920s, employees there had been interring bodies in graves that had already held coffins. In some places, there were 5 or 6 cadavers stacked one atop the other, and in others, rotting caskets with remains had managed to work their ways to the surface. And they poked out into the open air. Although several cemetery officials had gone to trial, they were eventually acquitted and Eastern Cemetery was abandoned and left to vandals and the destructive forces of nature. Most knew it as one of the scariest places in town, and not just for the marginalized spirits that supposedly haunted it. After dark, it came alive with the homeless, drug addicts, and sundry shiftless characters, maybe even a hobo or two. Yes, Eastern Cemetery, replied Mama Wawa. What, you afraid of that too? You, Mr. Silly Man, you afraid of everything. Across from her, Maybelline stifled a giggle and wriggled anxiously in her seat. I'm not afraid, I said, albeit not very convincingly. But is it safe to be there after dark? Oh, most assuredly not, said Mama Wawa. But we will have our own little security system, so there's no reason to worry. What security system is that? I said, somewhat warily. The best one ever, she said. Her name is Miss Tabitha, and she will take care of things for us if we have any trouble. Miss Tabitha? Who's she? Miss Tabitha is our security system, silly man, said Mama Wawa, getting up to leave. Yeah, and you don't want to mess with Miss Tabitha. Maybelline wrinkled up her nose and jabbed a coquettish finger in my direction. Or she gonna get you good. Then she dislodged herself from behind the table and joined Mama Wawa at the door. We'll see you tonight, Miss Maybelline said. And make sure you wear something pretty. She waved at us and then turned to say goodbye to the bartender. "Yes, right before the midnight," said Mama Wawa, followed by Maybelline. She breezed through the door and was gone. "Wear something pretty?" I looked at Kelly for clarification. What's that supposed to mean? I looked down at my attire and frowned. "Beats me," he said, "but I bet you're in for a memorable evening, to say the least." We exited our booth and found ourselves outside in the bright sunshine. The putt-putt noise crescendoed from the distance, and soon the weird guy on the goofy miniature motorcycle veered into sight, and he shook his finger at me as he squealed his tires and spun around back to the street. "I got a picture of this place in the 1937 flood." His voice croaked as he tried to raise it above the buzz of the motor. From the looks of it, he could have been around for the 1937 flood. I was about to turn around and tell him I found his revelation very interesting when something suddenly crashed into me and I was sent flying. I landed in a heap on the sidewalk several feet away. Cliffhanger. What knocked me over? That's where we're going to leave off tonight. So tune in tomorrow night, and that chapter is one of my favorite chapters, called Halloween, because it's what happened when I go and meet the drag queen slash transvestite slash voodoo acolytes at Eastern Cemetery in the old crematorium, the place where they burned the bodies. And Google Eastern Cemetery, Google crematorium or columbarium. You'll see all kinds of stories about Eastern Cemetery in Louisville. And we'll see what happens when I go to the voodoo ceremony. So thanks for tuning in tonight. Good to see you all. Like I said, we're going for week 4. So I'm glad you're all tuning in. Glad to see a couple new faces tonight. Like I said, tell your friends, invite them. All of the Facebook Live episodes I've done are available to watch after the fact. So you can go to our Louisville Historic Tours channel on YouTube. On my Facebook page, they're open to the public. So anything that I've done is there for you to go back and see. If you missed anything, go back and check these out. But like I said, just trying to promote old Louisville and help people get through the quarantine hours. Normally I'd be out about taking people through old Louisville, telling stories and showing off this beautiful neighborhood. But since we're kind of locked down, I'm going to meet everyone at 9 o'clock and show off the neighborhood that way. So like I said, we only got about a week or so left out of this book. When I'm done, I'll have to try to find a couple other stories, and hopefully by the time my stories run out, we can all be back to normal. Let's cross our fingers that the current situation is going to last too much longer. So good seeing you all. So happy to see all my old friends, Facebook friends that are old friends that I've never really met before. Looking forward to, in the future, we can get together and have a reunion. LouisvilleHistoricTours.com, once again. That's the page where you can find information about the tours and my books. Sean Stafford of Hunley Media has done a lot of great work. We're working on a line of merchandise, so if you're looking for t-shirts and stuff like that, there's some things available. It's slowly rolling out. There's only 1 or 2 things there, but if you're looking for something, you can get some things. But in another week or two, there'll be a lot more stuff there. So thanks for coming out, everyone. I said this before. You all think I'm getting on Facebook to help you all through the quarantine hours, but I'm coming on Facebook because you're all helping me get through the quarantine hours. So this gives me something to look forward to every night. So thank you very much, and love you all, and hope to see you tomorrow night. Have a good Sunday and have a good Friday night. Take care, everyone.